Today on Rough Riders, we're doing a wheel bearing repack on our RV in preparation for the camping season, so stick around. In preparation of the camping season, I'm getting my trailer ready to go out camping, and this is going to be one in a couple of different videos I'm going to do on the subject. But today's video, we're going to focus on repacking the wheel bearings as well as inspecting the brake and hub assembly. To do that, let's take a look at the tools you need to get this job done, and then we'll jump into the video. To complete this job, you need a lug wrench or a 3/4 inch socket and ratchet, a torque wrench capable of 50 foot-pounds, some paper towels, some red high-temp axle grease, a 1.5 inch deep well socket for the spindle nut, some brake cleaner. I used almost 4 bottles of it, or some mineral spirits. You need a bottle jack, preferred, regular jack will work too, a ratchet, a seal puller, a rubber mallet, a regular hammer, a couple of screwdrivers, a chisel, a flat piece of wood, and some Lego blocks if you're using a bottle jack so you can get it high enough to jack the trailer up. So this video is about my InTech Sol Dusk. It's outfitted with a 5,000-pound Dexter EZ Lube Axle. I'll explain what that is as I go through the wheel bearing repack. And while that is the axle on this particular trailer, the setup is going to be the same or similar on pretty much any of the InTech trailers. It's probably going to be pretty similar across a whole different number of RVs that use the Dexter axle. With that said, let's go ahead and jump into it. Let me show you where I'm jacking the trailer up on this particular trailer, because you don't want to jack it up by the axle. So the center of the trailer on this particular trailer, you have 2 beams, one right here and one over there, and in between those is the strongest part of the trailer. It's where the axle actually attaches. And so I'm using a bottle jack, and I'm getting right on this end of the bracket there to jack it up. So I've got it jacked up. I've got the wheel off the ground, so now I can pull it off. Important safety note, if you have your stabilizer jacks down on any of the corners, raise them up, because you don't want to lift one side up and put pressure on those stabilizer jacks and damage the jacks or your trailer. And so now I have access to the rotor hat and all of that sort of stuff, the rotor drum. And so next I got to pull the grease cap or spindle cap off. And so to do that, I'm going to use a chisel. You can do a screwdriver, a flat edge screwdriver, but it will be harder to get in there. So I found just a chisel works a little bit better. And I'm just going to lightly tap enough to get in there. I now have access to the retainer, the nut retainer, as well as the rest assembly, so that'll allow me to pull the drop. Just kind of get around it from each side, and it pops off like that. So that's the retainer nut, and that just keeps the nut from coming loose and now I'm going to go ahead and pop this off. This is a 1.5 inches, and so I got a deep well socket with a driver. And generally this is finger tight, but they can tighten up over time. So it shouldn't take much to break it free, just like that. And now I can pop that off. And then now there's a washer here with a flat edge on it, because the spindle has a flat side to it. So I'm going to use a couple screwdrivers and pull that out. That won't take much pressure. And then behind that is the bearing, just like that. And then I'm going to throw that in a box, because we're going to clean that up. And now I can get to the bearing. So let me pull that out. I can actually pull the whole hub off, which will pull that bearing out as well. Or not the hub, but the brake drum. So you can use that to kind of just pull it loose and kind of get to where you can get to it. And then there's your bearing. That's your front side bearing. And there's the drum. And we're going to get this all cleaned up, and we're also going to remove the backside bearing from the drum. And then here is the spindle. Here are your brakes, the magnet for the brakes, springs, all of that. So we're going to just kind of look all of that over and clean it all up. Now, as we look everything over, what we're looking for is we're looking for any flat spots, any wearing, anything like that. We're looking on the brake shoes. We're looking for any ruts or ridges or any uneven wear, stuff like that. We're looking at the springs to make sure the springs aren't rusted. Got a little bit of rust here and all of that. And I'll show you close-ups of all of this. So we're just kind of making sure everything looks good. All right, so here's the spindle, and you'll see because this is an EZ grease or EZ Lube Axle is what they call it. There's a little Zerk fitting right here, and then there's a little opening right there. And what it does is when you squeeze grease in, it comes through the spindle and comes out right here into the bearing, and then you keep squeezing it in until you see it start to come out the front side bearing, which is great as a sort of mid-season maintenance thing, but I would never rely on that as a full bearing repack. I don't even think Dexter recommends that you rely on the EZ Lube as a full seasonal thing. They do recommend that you do a repack at the once a year or every 12,000 miles. So that's why I do it at the beginning of the season. So that way I know they're generally good for the season. So with the front side bearing out, we need to get the back side bearing out. So the easier tool to use is something like this. This is a seal puller, and so it allows you to kind of get behind there and pry it out. But these seals are very easy to damage. So there is a metal, it's a soft metal ring that has a rubber boot, and then there's a little metal spring on the inside, and it's really easy to damage any of that. This is a really soft metal, so if you got in here and got underneath and tried to pry, you would end up denting this bearing or this backside seal. So I use a piece of wood. I hook that under the rubber seal, and then I pry against the wood, and that keeps pressure even across the seal and onto the hub itself, so that way you don't dent the seal, and it makes it easy to pop this thing out. So you just kind of go like that. And again, you want to be very careful not to damage anything, the seal, because then you'll have to replace it. Just like that. So now I was able to get it out without damaging the seal. And so now I can get that cleaned up. And then now I've got access to the backside bearing, which comes out just like that. And so now I can get all of this stuff cleaned up. So let's do that. As for cleaning things, start with paper towels. You'll go through a lot of paper towels. And then once I've done the best I can with paper towels, then you have an option. I use brake cleaner because I like the high pressure nozzles and stuff that actually kind of get in there and get all the grease out from the nooks and crannies. Some people will use mineral spirits, and they will just give it a mineral spirits bath, drop everything in there and let it set in the mineral spirits, which clean everything up. Either way is fine. I just prefer the brake cleaner because I think it makes it a little bit easier to get things out of everything, out of all the nooks and crannies. You don't want to get any grease on the inside of the drum, so you're going to make sure that's clean before you put anything back together. And so right in here, there's a channel all the way around, and then the same thing on this side. There is a channel right in here that you want to make sure you get all the grease out of. I'm ready to spray this down with brake cleaner and get all that last bit of residue out of the center. And so we're going to do that right now, and I'll come back when this is all clean. Here's a shot of the hub all cleaned up. I sprayed it down with brake cleaner and kept wiping it down until I got all the grease out of it. With it clean, now is the time to inspect where the bearings ride and make sure there's no damage there. Just kind of feel around inside and make sure you don't feel any pits, any flat spots, any ruts, grooves, or anything like that. That everything feels nice and smooth. This is where you're going to want to, when you're working with, anytime you're working with the brake cleaner stuff, wear glasses, because it comes out at a very high velocity and splashes all over the place, and it's very toxic. If it gets in your eyes, that won't be good. So wear safety glasses. On the backside seal, absolutely do not use brake cleaner on this. You have a rubber seal right here. I'll show you this when it's cleaned up. This brake cleaner is very corrosive to rubber. It will destroy that seal, so you don't want to use it on that. So this is that washer. You can see it has a flat spot right there, right where my fingers are, because that goes over the flat spot on the spindle. And so when I'm done cleaning up, I just kind of leave it in the paper towel until I'm ready to use it. Now we're going to go to the bearings, and I'm going to clean them with a paper towel first to get as much of the grease off there as I can. And when you're done thinking you've cleaned it all, you're not. And then on the bearing, you'll see there's a little channel right here. I'm going to take the paper towel and kind of get into that little channel, pull that bead up. Just like that. You know, I've got as much as I can with the paper towels out. Now we got to get into those little tiny crevices and all of that kind of stuff, all those little channels. And that's what the brake cleaner is going to be for. And it comes with one of those little straws. Now we're just going to start squirting it into the channel like this to try and get all of the grease out. Wipe it more with paper towels and keep going at it until we get it all. And like I said, this is the part where I say, if you think you got it all, trust me, you don't. And you'll see it's forcing more grease to the top. Even when I think I got it all, it forces more grease to the top when I squirt it through the bottom. So as I said, you'll know you're close when you're able to spin it, and it spins a lot more freely. With the bearings clean, I'm cleaning the brake seal now, and this we're only going to use paper towels. Again, we're not going to use the brake cleaner because it'll chew away that rubber. It'll dissolve that rubber. So we're just going to clean it up really well with paper towels. If you see damage to the seal, replace it. You don't, because if that seal fails, then you lose the grease out of the bearing, and then your bearing fails, and then you're stuck on the side of the road. So if you see any damage to anything, the brake seals or the rear seal, the bearings or anything like that, just replace them, and that'll save you a lot of grief on the side of the road. Seal. So this is the back side. Inside here is this rubber skirt. And again, this is a soft metal. So you can see here is the seal. There's the little spring that holds it in there. And so we've got that all cleaned up, and we're ready to start loading the grease on. Let me show you how all this stuff kind of goes together. So this is the rear seal. This rides on the outside of the spindle like that. Then your backside bearing rides like that, and then the front side bearing like that. I'm going to use NLGI number 2 red high temperature red axle grease or bearing grease. Okay, so to repack the bearings, then I'm going to take a scoop of grease and put it on my palm like that. And then I'm going to force it down into this channel of the bearing. And so, when you see it working, right, you'll start to see it squeeze out the top. And I'll try and get a close-up of that if I can. And so I'm just going to put it in and just kind of pressure, scoop a little at a time. So you can see it's starting to pop out the top more. When you see that you've got red grease popping out the top all the way around, then you know you've got it in there pretty good. And so now you just want to coat the outside. So now I'm going to grab my seal and I'm going to pack grease inside here, because as I said, that's kind of the grease reservoir. Now I'm ready to put the bearing and the backside bearing and the seal back in. I've got my hub greased up like that, and I filled that channel. And now I can drop the bearing in that I've greased up. So there's the bearing in, and now I'm gonna drop the seal in. Now the seal needs to be pressed in. So just as we had to pry it out, we're gonna have to knock this in as well. And to do that, I'm gonna set the seal there. I'm gonna go back to my board, place that over there, over top, and use even pressure all the way down and just tap it with the hammer until it seats. The seal is pressed in. So, and what I did was, again, I just set the board there like that and tapped it in evenly. You don't hit it hard, you just kind of sneak up on it until it sets in place. And so now that that's in, I can flip it over and do the other side. So I need to repack the front side bearing. And as I said, you know, inspect it. You're going to look for any flat spots on the bearing, any ridges, ruts, pits, or anything like that. And if you find any of that, replace the bearing. Okay, so the front bearing is repacked, and now I'm going to repack the front part of the hub and drop the bearing in, and then we'll start putting it all back together. We're going to drop our bearing in. Just like that. And now we're going to slide it on. Now I'm going to throw a little bit of grease on the spindle as well, not a ton, just enough to ease the sliding. But when I do, it's going to start to push this front bearing out. I just have to reseat it back in as we put the hub back on. We're going to do one more inspection of the hub lining, the drum lining, just to make sure we don't have any grease from our hands or anything like that on there. I'll go with my washer. This is going to act like a seal. This is where we're going to seat the bearing next. So we're going to put the spindle nut on, and we're going to torque it down to 50 foot-pounds. That's going to help us press the bearings all into place and help us seat the bearings. You want that to go on nice and easy. You shouldn't have to force it. Now I'm going to grab my torque wrench. This is already set for 50 foot-pounds. Crank it. As I start to crank it down, I'm going to spin the hub clockwise. So now the bearings are seated, and now I'm going to back that nut off. And what they say is should be finger tight. I go a little bit past finger tight, just to get a little bit more snug. You don't want to crank it down. That'll cause your bearings to go bad. So I take it to finger tight, and then I throw it just a tad further, about like that. So that way it's free spinning. I'm not putting too much pressure on the bearings or anything like that, and we're good to go. So now the last step is to put the retainer nut. Some axles have a cotter pin. There's a hole drilled through the spindle, and then you put a cotter pin, and that's what keeps the nut from backing off. This uses just a little retainer clip. Clean up your cap. Some people like to put grease in here. I generally don't. And now we're done. So now it's just a matter of putting the wheel back on, and you know, tightening everything down, dropping it, and don't forget to secure your lug nuts after you've dropped it and the wheel's back down on the ground. All right, so that's pretty much the job. Let me finish tightening these up, and then we'll wrap this up. Okay, so that's all there is to doing the wheel repack and, you know, inspection and all of those sorts of things. Hopefully you found this video helpful. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing. That always helps creators like myself. And if you have any questions, post those below. I'll get to those as quickly as I can. And, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time here on Rough Riders.